How do you describe pushing to your pregnant clients? In today's podcast, I talk with birth educator and doula Chantal Traub about pushing during labor.
Hello, friends. This is Lynn Schulte, and you are listening to the Birth Healing Summit podcast. We are here for meaningful conversations that will transform the way you work with pregnant and postpartum clients. Whether it is a new perspective, tool, or technique, you'll be able to implement it into your practice today. I invite you to sit back, listen with an open mind, and grab the golden nugget today's guest has to offer. Now let's get started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode. I have with us today Chantal Traub, and today we're going to be talking about helping our clients figure out how to push during labor. And hopefully by listening to this podcast, you're going to leave with a few tips and tricks to help encourage your clients to figure out how to best push during labor. So Chantal is a doula in New York. Is it city? Are you in the city?
New
You
York
are.
City, I am New York, Brooklyn,
Okay.
metro area.
In the metropolitan area there. And she's also a childbirth educator and a women's health coach. So welcome to the podcast, Chantal. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's really great to be here with you, Lynn.
Okay, so what is it? Let's start with this question here. When you are trying to help your clients understand how to push, do you talk about the similarities of having a bowel movement?
Yes.
Yes and
Because
no.
I
I
think
think your answer
yes
is
and
right.
no. Yes and no. I think there's like yes and. It's so interesting because one of the biggest fears is like, what if I poop while I'm pushing? And that's such a huge fear that
Yeah.
clients have. And honestly, and we'll go, the answer really is, well, well, often people need to poop before because the body's natural way of
Yes.
getting rid of everything to make
Yeah.
space for having a baby. So that often happens beforehand. But if you do, we get excited because what's behind the poop is what we're really excited about. So we call it positive poop. So
Oh, I
don't
love
worry
it.
about it.
I
Yeah.
love it. So that is really something important for us as practitioners here working with pregnant clients to help them to be aware of that. Yes, actually, your labor team loves it when you poop.
Yeah, you're pushing in the right way, the right direction.
Well, and you know that the baby's
Yeah.
hopefully following right behind that. So it's actually an okay thing. Because what I've learned from other midwives that I have interviewed in the past is that a lot of times as that baby's head is coming down and it hits the pelvic floor muscles initially, that's the first sign it feels like they have to poop.
Yes.
And
However, yes.
and then most people's reaction in their body is to like tighten up to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we need to help encourage our clients to understand that when that baby's head is coming down in and hitting the pelvic floor muscles, yes, it is hitting the rectum as well. And that's actually a beautiful sign. I try to, celebrate that because that means your baby's head is down low and it's getting ready to come on out. But when you get that feeling of having to push or to poop, that's when you need to relax your pelvic floor muscles. And
100%.
I um I teach in my holistic treatment of the pregnant body course how to palpate the posterior, the vaginal wall between levator ani and coccygeus is where I'm aiming at.
Mm-hmm.
And I give that proprioceptive awareness to my clients, my pregnant clients, and say, here's where you're going to feel the baby's head first. If they don't have an epidural, right? If they have an epidural, they're not gonna feel the baby's head hitting their pelvic floor, correct?
Well, it depends on if the epidural is beginning to, not the pelvic floor, but like at the end, like towards the end, when the baby's coming down, they may feel like they feel it like in their hip. They might be feeling, it's interesting. It depends if the epidural's wearing off or if it's really light. And so some people might not feel anything and some people might start feeling. So it really depends.
Okay. But once they feel that feeling of needing to poop, that's the signal for the body to or that what we want the pelvic floor muscles to do is to relax more, right? Not tighten up and try to prevent the poop from coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I always have a conversation with that. When we talk about if feeling that need to poop, often it is because the baby's coming back down and it's flexing and it's pressing like on the rectum and the anus. And so often they feel like, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom. And I might say you may need to go to the bathroom or you may not. And often I'll say that will go, they won't say that again. I will like, did that feeling go away? And they go, oh yeah, it went away. So I said, notice if it comes with a contraction. And so and they'll be like, oh, okay, I'll notice. And if that feeling like, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom is with the contraction, we know that that's that contraction bringing the baby's head down. But it's not like I'll run and call the OB or anything like that. We'll wait because we know the baby still has to come down and extend forward. And until that feeling's absolutely constant, or they're instinctively just doing that anyway, because you'll hear those sounds, I would wait. So that sensation, and if they have an epidural and they can't feel, I'll be like, okay, we'll just notice if you feel, well, with an epidural, they don't always feel that, to be honest. But without an epidural, they will often feel like, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom. But it's funny, sometimes an epidural is wearing off, and that's often right when they're wanting to get a top off. So it's often worth getting checked because it's really, really close. Because
Okay.
they're feeling other sensations. So it might be a good time just to know, like, okay, you may want to get a top off, but you may just want to wait and let this head
Are
come
you
down.
saying top off
Yeah,
or
like a little extra, little bolus.
little extra epidural, right?
Yeah, the problem with a bolus at that point, or even at like say 9 centimeters, is sometimes you're the most numb for that first hour or two. So it's
Mm.
sometimes putting the spanner in the works. If you get that top off as it's getting the most strong, as you start pushing, and then you can't push in a coordinated way, and that may lead you into trouble. So it's often a decision about, like, do I have a few more hours, right? Maybe that, yes, remember how we were talking about, like, in our session about like that passive, the second stage of labor, like a passive phase and then a more active participatory phase. If you've got that passive phase where you're resting and letting that baby labor down for an hour or 2 or 3, then yes, you may want that top off so you can really relax during that time.
Yeah.
But if it's imminent, then you may want to just dig deep and help the
Yeah.
baby out. Yeah.
What Chantal is talking about there, everybody, is that we just recorded her interview for the Birth Healing Summit this year. And we talked a lot about second stage pushing and what is really needed to help our clients to have a successful second stage with minimal tearing of the pelvic floor muscles. So please make sure you check that out as we dive way deeper into that. I wanted to ask, with an epidural, um, do you notice if someone has practiced pushing? Because in my pregnancy course, after I help get them the kinesthetic awareness of their pelvic floor and where baby's going to come through, then I have them practice the lengthening of the pelvic floor muscles. So, like, push my fingers on out is what I have them do. And then we practice it in every single position that we can.
Mhm.
And, like I said in the summit interview, supine is always the worst. That hook lying position there's always minimal lengthening of the pelvic floor muscles. You get them in side lying and hands and knees, and they're just like, boom. And they're like, oh, I get it now. I'm curious from your experience, if someone has practiced that well during pregnancy and before labor, if they get an epidural, do you find that they still have the motor memory of that lengthening of the muscle and the pushing? Is it more effective versus if someone doesn't practice it at all? Do you have any
Oh, I
sense?
think absolutely, absolutely practicing is more helpful, right? Because one, you'll have the muscle memory, and even if you do tense up, because I always feel like there's a little bit of a learning curve, you'll get it on like just a few pushes as opposed to taking an hour just to practice to get, it definitely shortens that pushing stage. If you know how to relax, you need to know how to lift, and you need to the opposite, because some people don't know how to let go until they know how to lift. So
Oh,
you know
well, It's amazing how many people you have your fingers on their pelvic floor and you're like, okay, push my fingers out. And they like contract and pull them up and in, it's just like
Yes,
no
yes,
concept of it.
yes, yes. And that's why I'm so passionate about that, because this is what I saw for so many years over and over again, is that I found moms were working against themselves.
Yes.
As they pushed, they would be drawing up, working against themselves. And so that's actually why I created my class, Pushing Powers, because I wanted to
Yeah.
empower moms to know, like inform them and educate them, so one could know how to advocate for themselves, but know what to do. But so yeah, and I'll give you this exact story, because I had a client that I knew her perineum was perfectly prepared. Like I knew,
Uh-huh.
and now it was time to push. And um, and this often happens, is the OB comes in and goes, let's, because they're looking at those head compressions on the monitor, especially with an epidural, right? So they're looking at, and she came in, okay, let's see what's going on. And this baby it was a good time to start, because the baby was around +1. So it was a fine time to start pushing, to come through those ischial spines. But as we started pushing, like nothing budged, not a thing, like no movement. And so we did a few pushes, and her OB was, you know what, this is going to take a while. I'm going to go do some notes. I'll go get lunch. I'll come back in a few hours. You guys carry on. And I was like, no, don't leave. This is not going to take hours. And she was like, Chantal, come on, first time, better. So I was like, no, this is not going to go. But anyway, so she left. And so the nurse and I was working with a great nurse. I was giving her all the cues. Like nothing happened. Every time she pushed, she would just tighten up. So this was at like the end of the summer, and my kids had been like cannonballing into like pools and lakes. And I was like, you know what? Don't take your legs. Just come in over here so folk later can see. Don't take your legs, because what I found is often when, say, if you're pushing on your back and you're taking the legs, I find that they would tighten up their legs so much, right? Tighten up the legs, and nothing happened. I said, you know what? Don't take your legs. Actually, take your hands around your shins like a cannonball. And as she did so, her pelvic floor just bulged. And then we saw the top of the head. And I said, okay, don't push, blow, 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 blow. Look at me and blow. And this baby just started oozing out. And I was like, okay, blow, blow, blow. The nurse looked at me with saucer eyes. And I said to her, unless you want to catch this baby, call the doctor to come back. And I was saying to my client, blow, 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 blow. The nurse ran to the back of the room and pressed the monitor for the whole labor and delivery floor. And she said, doctor, if you want to catch baby in room 8, she said the name, come in, right away. Whoops, that didn't crown. The doctor came in, and I'm saying to my client, blah, 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 blah. And the doctor ran in, the baby was at the ears, and she got on one glove and supported the head as that baby crowned and birthed, and the rest of the baby slipped out intact perineum.
Wow.
So to your point, Lynn, the practicing absolutely helped, but there was a little bit of a learning curve. Like, okay, don't tense up. How do you relax?
Yeah.
And so when I am with my clients and I'm supporting the leg and they're pushing me with their legs across the room, you tighten your pelvic floor. You have to relax. So, I want their legs to be loosey-goosey if they're pushing in that position, right? For example, because as you say, that position's the hardest to kind of coordinate in.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, what are some of those cues? What are the words that you use to help your clients to figure out how to push? Maybe even before labor or in labor.
Yeah. So like you will maybe do an internal exam. I try to get to, because I don't do internal exams. I try to go from the outside. And so I'll have them, prepare by one, because often I feel like most people are really kind of tight in that posterior triangle. So I like I like try to find like the perfect ball that fits into those coccygeal muscles just like really nicely, and have them sit on the ball and just breathe. so they can notice. So I'll with this, but also with breath, I like to, so that they can start learning how to relax and lengthen. And I might have my clients, because I want them to feel safe, right? You have to feel safe enough
Yes.
to let this baby out. So I'll often have them do pelvic breaths. I'm like, don't count sheep, count pelvic breaths at night before you go to sleep at night, where they feel safe and cozy. Ideally, they
Yeah.
feel safe and cozy in their bed, in their bedroom. So before they fall asleep, just focus on, inhale, feel that expansion. And as you exhale, comes to neutral.
Yeah.
Inhale, feeling that expansion. Come to, so they just connecting their breath to their pelvic floor and feeling that, because that's sometimes just hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And then, but how do you actually instruct the push?
yeah, yeah,
Because like some people just don't get the push at all. They
yeah,
don't know how to do it.
yeah. So again, like sometimes I might even go from the outside with their permission, and I'll just put my hands like on the inside of their sit bones, and I might give them like a reference. Okay, push here, like in this direction.
Yeah.
If they want me to give them some feedback. Sometimes an OB can press so that they just not crazy, just a
Yeah.
gentle press down can just give them that direction of where to push. But okay, so for example, if they push in this like traditional, and so I will help my clients, as you do, be able to push in all the different positions. I want them to know, because again, it's not only them, it's about the baby. Like, what
Yeah.
position is this baby going to like being in? Because I've had clients say, oh, I'm going to push on my left side, and this is what I
Yes.
prepared for. And then in labor, the baby saying, hey, mom, you're pressing on my cord. Can you move?
Right. Yeah. 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 I tell my clients, I'm like, okay, well, here practicing, you did best in this position. However, let that go and do whatever position you need to in labor, because your body and your baby knows. So helping them to trust in their body to do what they feel called to. I think, one of the things that I've actually told some pregnant clients is I want you to just spend a few minutes doing what your body wants to do in that moment. Like, does it want to move? Does it want to shimmy? Does it want, like hip circles? Like, just listen to your body and get a sense of what your body wants to do. And that to me is listening to that interoception that I feel is critical for birth.
It really is. I love that, because it is helping your clients develop that
Yes.
intuition, that embodied awareness. Absolutely. And so much of the time, I work here in New York City, people are like, go, 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 and all about the shopping lists. No, but this is the part to be able to really quieten down and listen to inside, I think that's absolutely important. So one way that, because I guess I teach like more from the outside, prenatally, I might have them connect to those muscles. So I like using a ball, for example, and then I'll tell you like in labor. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, so I might have them sit on a birth ball so that they have that perception of something between their sit bones.
Yes.
And then we'll go over like the different functions of the pelvic floor, of course, but then to focus on the releasing down, or if you will, that puff down, that
Yeah.
lengthening. So first of all, to connect to what that feels like. And so the idea of a pinwheel and sitting on something, blowing on the pinwheel and noticing what happens, so that they can kind of go, oh yeah, I feel how my sit bones have to widen. I feel like maybe how the pubic bone and tailbone have to move away from each other. That downward feeling rather than drawing up. So to kind of get that feeling, and then when it comes to, so often in labor, they'll be like, don't like hold your breath, don't let the breath out. So we'll practice almost that oceanic breath.
What do you mean by that?
The
Explain.
Ujjayi breath from yoga, or the J breath. So we're not so inhale through the nose, but you're exhaling and you relaxing your jaw, your throat, your tongue. It's that sound, like if you took a seashell and put it next to your ear.
Yeah.
So I like references to, to the fluidity, to the ocean. So people often get that, because when you do that oceanic breath, you actually feel like it more forward to the front. You feel the muscles relax, but it's a little bit more forward. So often, yes, you do. It is the muscles have to do what you're doing when you're having a bowel movement, but when you're pushing the baby out, it's more like it's more down and forward, almost like you're trying to push. Like if you inserted a tampon, I don't know if anybody, or a diva cup, and you put it in the wrong way, and you have to bear down slightly to
Yeah.
adjust it. It's
Yeah.
that more forward feeling. So it's down and forward is what you're wanting to do to help. I mean, if you're pushing a posterior baby, that's a little bit hard. You have to work much harder, and that kind of coach directed pushing, certainly like the way that you explain it. But that's that initial feeling, and then it's more forward. So I
Okay.
want them to be able to get that sense. I don't want them pushing only down into the anus, because that's where I see those hemorrhoids.
Okay.
If it's uncoordinated, or this baby just isn't in an ideal position, or it might be just too soon. But we never know about the baby, because if the baby's not doing well, or it's in a funky position, then we have to dig deep and help that baby out. So you have to know how to access those muscles to be able to lengthen them. So is that helpful in that way?
I think so. I'm curious with when you were talking about that story and you were like, okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. What kind of breath were you asking your client to do? They're just an exhale?
Oh, yeah. When the baby's head was crying, when it was
Yeah.
oozing out, I didn't want her to add extra force. The uterus was now pushing. So, like for that active participatory phase, we want to like dig deep and work with the uterus, kind of like help the baby come down, like we kind of helping that baby down. But then once that baby begins to crown, we want to let the uterus just do the work and let that baby ooze out. And I didn't want her to, like give that extra, also because
Push.
since her OB, I mean, at the end of the day, her nurse could have caught the baby, or I
Yeah.
could have, but I really wanted a doctor to be right in, and I wanted that baby to ooze out. And she had an epidural, so we could control it. The baby was coming anyway, so we
Right.
wanted to slow it
Well,
down.
that's what I tell my clients is like, look, you need to understand that if you are unconscious, your uterus can still push this baby out. And so I think sometimes it's just a matter of people getting out of the way
Hmm.
and allowing it to happen versus feeling like they have to push it out. But I don't know about you, but there's like when that ejection reflex kicks in, you can't help but not push. You know, it's so
The
intense in
thing
your body.
is, yes. However, here, I definitely, as a doula, I'm assisting a lot of people have unmedicated births, but that's almost like 92% or 96% of epidural rates. So people need to learn how to push with an epidural. And
Yeah.
so I feel, because I remember, I'm certified through two childbirth education, companies certified. And I was always taught as a childbirth educator, like we would like skim over the pushing because you'd know how to push. It would be instinctive, but it's not always like that. I would love my clients to come in and they're like, oh, and they just like, that would be amazing. But often it's not like that. And with an epidural, or if the baby's in, a funky position, you do need some directed pushing. And I think the studies show with an epidural that to avoid an unplanned cesarean is some of that directed pushing until the head's much lower. Without an epidural, you want to, yes, of course.
Okay.
Let
Now, with we're talking to a lot of physical therapists here, and we all teach the TA and pelvic floor contraction together, for strengthening of core. And we know that for pushing during labor, we need to disconnect those two. Do
yes.
you worry about what the belly's doing in labor with your mamas for pushing, or do you just focus on like lengthening out the pelvic floor muscles? I'm curious what your
No, absolutely. I'm like, relax the navel to the knees to let the baby out. Relax the navel to the knees. So, because if you do like a belly pump, I have my students practice like, hey, do like you learn in fitness class, do a belly pump. Okay, you draw those. Can you relax your pelvic floor muscles? I can. So
Hey,
if
but
you're
I can't.
no.
So that's how, I mean, I've lived constipated my most of my life. I find to get more effective force, I actually contract my TA and relax my pelvic floor muscles.
I see, to go forward. I'm like thinking relax. I mean, the upper abs
So I
do
meant
get,
I'm contracting, I'm pulling them back to give me more force to let that happen. And I've actually been, I've taught my clients to actually contract TA and relax pelvic floor because the uterus is doing top down. And when we can and pull in and give it a slight compression, it gives more force to the uterus to do what it needs to do, as
okay.
long as there's lengthening of the pelvic floor muscles.
Yeah, I like the upper abs. So for example, so I'll, when someone's pushing, say, for example, like in the traditional hospital position, and there are here, right? So often the cue is, and you're gonna hate this, but often the cue is, okay, bring your knees to your underarms, curl around that baby and push, right?
Yeah.
So I know they may land up in that position, so I'm gonna reframe it so they know what not to do. So take your hands as low down as you can. If your arms can reach your sit bones, and do an internal rotation. You're controlling your legs. Someone's just supporting them. So don't let anybody push them anywhere. They're just supporting your legs. And then I don't teach curl around the baby, but if you just look at your baby, so look at your baby and you're keeping your throat, your jaw soft, and just roll these arms back. So you just roll back. That engages these upper abs. You don't even have to think about it because there's so many moving parts. Don't overthink about it. And
Right.
relax these legs. So if you push in like this, right, your legs, pushing the person across the room, you're tightening your pelvic floor. So relax, loosey-goosey. I have them do windscreen wipers in between. I give them some nervous system, exercises to do in between pushing contractions or they just rest in, like you rest in between in that position. Of course, when you're on your side, then it doesn't, just internal, you're not curling, you just, you're going into it. And some people do have to kind of, when they bear down, they feel the pelvic floor a little bit. If they kind of do a little bit of a curl, they kind of feel those muscles a little bit more. And the hospital beds have something really interesting because sometimes I find when they hold their legs, they tightening up their legs. So it really is going to be depending on the person. So this is going to be really great where they can do like a towel pull, a sheet pull. They're relaxing their legs and they're pulling. Or the hospitals have these handles. So always on the bed and say, okay, don't relax your legs. Your legs are loosey-goosey and you just pull like that. And that just activates those muscles enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So for everybody listening to this podcast, please check it out on YouTube so you can see the video of Chantal showing you the different positions laying on a bed and what a mom needs to do with that. So please check out the YouTube channel to get more information that way. So yeah.
But having said that, because I don't want people to feel like, oh, I never learned how to push on my back. Like if I just, I wasn't allowed to push on hands and knees, or the baby didn't tolerate that. So I just want them to know in case they land up there. I want them to be able to push in all the positions because we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So yes, I always start off like, where do you feel it most? And as you mentioned, hands and knees or sideline is where people.
Yeah.
And then just on that one, sometimes I find moms want to reach back. And so the beds have holes because that's when, if you push a bed, that's where the hands go in, and you can take that sheet pull and then they can pull back. And that also creates that lift, can be really helpful. And then just on that curl, because the head once the baby begins to crown, I'm cueing their spouse or their significant other to move. I want them to be able to let their head go, because as the baby extends to come under, sometimes the mom will mimic that move. And so often what I see is as the baby begins to crown, mom will instinctively reach down. I may even offer, do you want to feel your baby's head? Because that will definitely slow you down. Like there's nothing more special than having that baby just come into your hand. So that's like, whoa, that's really going to help them slow them down. And often they will instinctively, throw their head back. I want them to, because that fascia that connects from the throat all the way down to the pubic bone will help lift that pubic bone to allow the baby to slip underneath. So it may be to find those muscles where they lift, but then I want them to, go where I want them to do what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, that's the most important piece to the puzzle here is, again, trying to help our clients tune into themselves, stay connected to their body as much as possible, and instinctively move and instinctively do what they feel called to do. And to set aside, I tell my moms, you're not meant to be thinking during childbirth. You shouldn't be thinking too much. So let's really practice in the clinic here. Let's practice different ways to push, different positions to push in so that you have them in your back pocket and you just automatically go to them versus having to think and try to remember, oh, what did Lynn say when I was working with her? We want it to just become automatic for them. Right?
Yeah, and to go back to that interoception. So sometimes, I want my client to spend some time, maybe just moving, like, and some people have a hard time moving if it's not, say a structured class, like do
Yeah.
this position or that position, do this shape, that shape, just to move in the way, just feel how your body wants to move. Because in labor, we want them to get into that instinctual brain. And I think moms instinctually do. Like I had this one client who was having a home birth and she struggled with the labor part. She couldn't quite get herself. So it was hard helping her through the labor because she was like flailing. She just couldn't get in, like let the storm just ride through her. But when it came to pushing, wow, she was in her body. She was on her hands and knees. She had her hand, she was like on her baby. She was completely in her body. So I feel sometimes that part is easier for moms to really embody because it's so instinctual. Of course, if there's, no epidural and they can really connect. Sometimes the laboring part is hard, but that's much easier for them.
Wow. Such great information, Chantal. Thank you so much. I love this discussion so, so much. And so everybody, please make sure you check out the Birth Healing Summit this year. Chantal and I go into second stage pushing. We talk a lot more about what really needs to happen in our clients' bodies beyond just what we've talked about here. So there's several good golden nuggets that you're going to get out of that interview. So please make sure you check that out and listen in to the summit this year. So thank you, Chantal, so much for sharing what you did today. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And we will see you all in the next episode. Here is to smoother births and faster recoveries. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Today's podcast was brought to you by the Institute for Birth Healing. To discover more, visit instituteforbirthhealing.com. To claim $50 off of any online course, use coupon code podcast50 at checkout. Till next time, I'm Lynn Schulte, founder of the Institute for Birth Healing.